right, welcome to yet another episode, Season 2 of Spilling the Career Tea. I'm Bill, that's Jerry. We have a wonderful guest here today. We'll introduce in a minute. And we are on episode 1 of Season 2, maybe episode 2.
No, this is Season 2.
Yeah.
We're on episode...
1, 2?
No, 3 or 4.
We introduced your book.
Right.
Which we'll come back to.
Episode 1.
We'll come back to later. Mm-hmm. But I want to get to our guest, if that's all right.
That's fine by me.
All about career readiness for anybody that's been following us and knows. And if you're new to this is great stuff for early career professionals to manage your career, get that internship, that full-time job, or make that career pivot. Today, we're thrilled to have a wonderful colleague and friend of mine, Barbara Kurz. Barbara's here. She'll get to introduce herself in a minute. Barbara and I work together, and she'll iterate on that. And she has, I think what's unique, Barbara, and you can talk about it, a very aligned but unique set of experiences that make you, in my view, a subject matter expert around careers, coaching, recruiting, talent, but I'm not going to steal your thunder. What's going on, Barbara? Who are you? Why are you here today?
Who am I? That's a big question, but thank you for those kind words, Bill. Yeah, my career has been wonderful, and I feel very fortunate. I wouldn't say it was all pre-thought through, premeditated. I kind of went where the energy was, whether I was working here in the States or moving overseas, which is another discussion we can get into. Yep. Managing a job search from here overseas is a whole different thing. But, I started my career early days in the good old chemical bank, now Chase. And, it was hard. I wasn't sure I had a social work background coming out of college. And, decided that I probably wanted to move into human resources as opposed to moving into social work. And so, the entry-level roles were few and far between, but I ended up landing a role in recruiting at a very junior level and working myself up. And I stayed in recruiting, as you know. We worked at Citibank together. But I also, moved and broadened into talent management at the right time. You gave me that opportunity. Thank you. But, the whole world of people and selection and assessment has been a big part of my career, whether it's been on the corporate side or the executive search side, where we were working for clients.
Yeah. But you've also... Now, you're a coach.
I am.
Where did that come from? And why are you doing that, and what is that all about?
Yeah. So actually, before I joined you at Citi, I went to Georgetown, and it was early days of coaching certification. I live in New York. None of the universities here had those programs at that time. This was in the early 2000s. So a few of the professors I spoke to at Columbia Teachers College suggested I go to Georgetown because the programs here weren't going to start for a couple of years. And I did. It was a great program down in Georgetown. It continues today. And I just really wanted to go a little deeper on my coaching and counseling skills, which that program gave me a really good baseline for that. I was in executive search here at the time. And then when I came out of the coaching program, I decided not to pursue coaching because I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to have my own business. I wanted to work with other people. And then the Citibank opportunity came. And as you might recall, Citi had a great coaching program internally, which I applied to. And that was a great way to hone my skills while being in HR and talent and, continue to work with clients and use those skills. So that was my rationale, just because I wasn't a coach at that time. I had coaching in my background, and I certainly worked with people, junior levels, mid-levels, senior levels within Citi from a coaching perspective.
One of the other aspects, and I know because we know each other, you've worked for some very large firms.
Yeah.
Maybe just reiterate the flow there. I think you said American, obviously Citi, but give us the flow. And today you're more focused on coaching in a smaller firm, but give us just a quick history. Because I think it's important. I often ask the question, small, medium, or large, right? I preferred always to work at a large global company, and it was just what happened for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think when I was early on coming out of school, I was focused on large companies, but they have more hiring, traditionally, and there's more opportunity. And honestly, there's more opportunity to move and grow in many big organizations. So I think that was initially what attracted me. In the days I started in banking, there was a lot of hiring of undergraduates in credit training. I think those programs have pulled back substantially, but the banks still are good places to learn a lot, be developed. The human resources function in the banks is usually quite evolved in my experience, and some of them are really best in class, I have to say. So for me, staying within financial services made sense. American Express, again, I was recruiting at that time and leading recruiting. So the organizations that were of most interest to me were where I could come in and really manage a team to recruit large numbers of people into the company. And so American Express was one of those. Citibank clearly was one of those. And then my last corporate career was with MetLife, where I ran recruiting. And I will say, in probably American Express, maybe at Citi Cards, you can keep me honest there, Bill, but certainly at MetLife, one of the things that attracted me to those organizations is they were changing. They were either going more global or they needed some changes in terms of how they were recruiting. Actually, before Amex, I was at Booz Allen, and I ran staffing for them. And they told me when I got hired, you won't be here in 2-3 years. There's nowhere for you to go, which was refreshing at some level. But I learned so much being in a consulting firm. And it was smaller than the big corporates, but I fine-tuned my recruiting skills, my assessing of people tremendously, because the consultants really were the talent agents of that firm.
Do you think they would tell you that today? That there's nowhere for you to go, you won't be here?
It's a good question, Jerry. I don't know. I mean, there was no really HR function to speak of.
Right.
I was the top person in recruitment. I hired experienced people coming out of business schools 2-3 years out, and I actually started to hone my executive search skills during that time. What was interesting about that experience when I went to Amex, they were doing a lot of things right. They have a great brand, but things like one example, you look for opportunities to kind of make an impact, right, and make a contribution. And I went in and I was running recruiting, and they were hiring MBAs, but their summer programs were quite small. And at Booz, McKinsey's the same, I'm sure, other consulting firms, you almost overhire in the summer. You certainly over-interview first-year MBAs to decide who you want and who maybe isn't ever going to be right for consulting and who you might just keep tracking. And so one of the things that I was able to change at Amex in the first year I was there was to triple the size of the summer intern program. I got line leadership to agree, this is a really good investment because guess what? You don't have to go back and do second-year recruiting. You will have already done that by overhiring or over-interviewing the top people from the first year, and then pick who you want to come back. So I know it sounds so obvious, but budgets being what they were, HR owned the budget. We only had so much money. So I went to the line leaders and said, would you fund XYZ to bring in 10 people this summer? And the answer usually was yes, once they knew the rationale. Right. And that it would save them money in the long run, and they would have access to the best talent. So again, that's kind of what I got drawn to. MetLife, went global through some acquisitions, and they brought in a new head of HR. There was a new CEO. I liked the feeling of change, and one of the things the Crow did, the head of HR at the time, he really was very international himself, and he brought in strategically minded international HR people. And having lived overseas myself, I had that background, and so we really were in a build mode when I first joined MetLife, and it was exciting, to build a team, to upgrade, certain roles, and I like that. I guess I was drawn to that when I think about it.
Yeah. So, and that's what's interesting, I think, and we're going to probe in a moment, but talent acquisition at all levels, right? Deep in that. Talent strategy, deep in that.
Yeah.
Big firms, cultures, experiencing that. Favorable firms, right? That had
excellent firms.
Good cultures.
Yeah.
And then coaching, right? And coaching, I happen to know more seniors today.
Yeah.
And we're going to see how that applies to juniors in a moment. But I'm going to put you right on the spot right away because you sent me this article called Why College Graduates Feel Betrayed. About a month ago this came out, right? New York Times. I have it right here. I read it, and I was struck by, some of the themes that were mentioned here, right? I'll just quote a couple. too many people graduate from college with useless degrees, the belief is, sky-high debt, and long odds of owning a home. Speak Gen Z today, right? Economic challenges prevail facing recent college grads, right? Grads are having a harder time finding work, and almost unheard of, here's a stat, right? The unemployment rate for recent college grads exceeds the country's overall rate, about 4.3%, right? And that's been the case for 5 straight years now. I found that kind of shocking, right? Artificial intelligence, Jerry's favorite. Watch out, here it comes, right? And then the last thing I'll say and get you to respond to this is Gallup found that the portion of college grads who thought today that it was a good time to find a quality job, a mere 19%, down from 70% in 2022. What's up with all this? You agree? Disagree? What's going on here?
Well, I mean, it's a sobering article, and I think a lot of it's true. That said, there have been ups and downs in the market, in the employment scene forever, right? I mean, I think, I certainly experienced it. You may have as well. I mean, I think this doesn't get at the article so much, but, what is your expectation, right? I think one of the things that struck me was, what is the expectation? I mean, you're not going to come into, a high-paying top role unless maybe you're in investment banking, and then that's hard work. You work for everything that they pay you, and that's a very competitive business.
Sure.
But sometimes you just have to get in the door and show people what you can do. I know when I first got out of school, the job I took at Chemical Bank, truth be told, was a receptionist in the college recruiting area. My father almost had a heart attack. I didn't send you to 4 years of college to be a receptionist. But I liked the people that I interviewed with. Mm-hmm. I knew there were campus recruiter jobs that I would have loved. You own certain schools and you go there and all the milk runs. And they said to me, well, those jobs are filled right now. There's 3 of them, but come in and do a good job, and we'll let you know. And in those days, everyone was, handing in their resumes. And so I took it upon myself to review resumes, to understand from the recruiters what they look for, and did cuts of resumes and hoped to goodness that I could move it up at some point. And 9 months in, one of the coordinator jobs opened and I got it. But it was hard, Right. It wasn't what I expected to be doing. It was a little embarrassing, but I thought, what, this is a good bank from what I could tell. The people I interviewed with seemed really supportive. And it was worth a shot. It maybe wouldn't have worked out that way, but it did for me. Mm-hmm. And, you just sort of want to work with good people who hopefully will give you the opportunity, even if it's part-time.
Yeah, but I think the difference there is a mindset. I'm going to come in, I'm going to start wherever I can get a role, right?
That's right.
And I'm going to hope that I can leverage good performance and skill. Now, Jerry, you coach hundreds, if not thousands, of people at Fordham. Mm-hmm. Do they tell you they're feeling betrayed these days as they approach graduation?
I don't know if I necessarily feel like they're feeling betrayed. Let me just add, Bill, when I went to law school, in orientation, they said, start thinking about what city you want to live in. Yeah. And in 3 years, you're going to have to move to that city because you'll have a couple of job offers and everything's going to be great. By the time I graduated, I was the only one that had a job out of law school. So things change rapidly, and this is nothing new. Right. You could have felt betrayed at that time, or you could have logically thought about why this was happening. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that I was smarter or better than anybody else in law school. It was that maybe my perspective on things was a little different, and I just had a little different attitude and was willing to go where the job was rather than choose a city and get a couple job offers in that city. It wasn't that anyone intentionally misled me. It wasn't that I didn't learn what I was supposed to learn. It was that the economy was different, and it had changed over a couple of years. There's a lot of things that happen that we don't know are going to happen. In fact, the other day I was speaking to an alumni And I said, if I told you 6 years ago that we were going to have a pandemic and you were going to be in lockdown for a year or two, what would you have said?
You're crazy.
And you would have said, you're crazy. That'll never happen. I go, well, not only did it happen, it wasn't the first time it happened.
Right.
Right.
So you got to sort of go with the flow and remember, history is bound to repeat itself.
Right.
Nothing we're going through today
Right.
has never happened.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm going to, so think about this, to those points, and I don't want to, disrespect the Gen Zs out there because I'm a baby boomer. I won't ask you what you are, but, is it a different expectation today? Some of it you hear about instant gratification, right?
Yes.
Gotta have it now. Gotta own that home, 2 years after graduation.
Yeah.
May not. So
Right.
I don't know. I don't. It feels like. What do you think, Bob? I mean, this generational thing. Don't hate me, Gen Zs. I'm a big fan, or millennials, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Look, I think that's part of it, perhaps. I think you have to have your ego in check. Just get a job. Just get a job. Show people what you can do, and bring some humility into the scene. I guess I had to have those things when I think about it at the time. I wanted a job. I wanted to move out of my parents' house. To me, success looked like getting an apartment in Manhattan, living paycheck to paycheck, which is what I did. It wasn't always easy. But, again, I think if you can try to find your way to good organizations, and I do realize as I say that, it's hard to tell from the outside. But these days, the access that people have that I didn't have, you didn't have, is LinkedIn. Connect with people. Find out what they like about their employers, why they left there, why they stay there. And there's so much more information that you can learn from now before you join an organization. And again, it doesn't have to be a big organization. When I moved over to London with my husband, who was getting a PhD, I started looking over here and decided, I want to work for a British firm. I don't want to work for an American firm over there. And I landed, as you know, in a British search firm. It was a small firm. I was the only American. Talk about having to kind of, eat humble pie. It was a very white glove British search firm. I loved it. It felt like home to me. But I had to read my audiences. I had to learn, be humble, ask questions, even though I was pretty experienced when I went over there. And I think the way I approached them, the way they experienced me in the beginning helped me. It didn't come in like some swashbuckling American, like, I know everything, let me tell you. I was really more like, hey, can I ask you some questions? A lot of it is how you build rapport, how you build trust.
But Barbara, you and I spoke about this a little bit before.
Yeah.
The messaging is so much different now.
I know.
When we were in college, there were no career centers. There was no development. It was, hey, get your degree and then you're on your own.
Exactly.
Maybe in 5 to 10 years, when you're making money, you come back as an alumni and give us more money.
That's true.
But
That's
right,
true.
you weren't coached, you weren't developed. Maybe you had a career fair once in a while.
True.
The expectations now.
Today.
Everything you hear is, what's your return on investment? Why are you paying these enormous fees for a college education when you can be a welder? And there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
But I've always said, Bill, you'll back me up on this, your education, there's really not a return on investment on what you get from going to college.
Right.
And the message that there is wrong, in my opinion. It's kind of like buying a house, right? You hope that the value of your house increases over the years, but you don't get into a home, a residence, thinking this is my investment.
Right.
You get into it to raise a family.
That's right.
Maybe school is a consideration. Maybe you want a big enough place for children to run around. There are so many considerations that at the end of the day, if you live somewhere for 25 or 30 years and you sell it for significantly more than you paid for it, I guarantee you, if you go back and look at what you spent and the taxes you paid, the return on investment is rather poor.
Yeah, not that great, yeah.
Right.
So looking at owning a home as an investment and looking at college as an investment, in my mind, are mistakes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what are we saying to those juniors and seniors out there that are struggling right now or making that first pivot, are we saying, hang in there, it'll be okay?
Well, we're teaching skills that can actually be of value to employers. And that's another miss, in my opinion. Higher education doesn't say this is what's going to get you a job.
No, they don't.
You know, they teach you a core curriculum, and then you specialize in certain things. The idea that there are useless majors, that to me, that's not accurate.
Right.
You know, you could. A lot of what we're hearing is liberal arts majors are in major demand now because you need prompt engineers, you need AI specialists, you need people who understand all of these different subjects to figure out how to program AI, how to do the machine learning associated with it.
Yeah.
So some of those things may be making a huge comeback. That's what we're starting
That's
to
interesting.
see.
Yeah. Well, you know, you mentioned skills, Jerry. I mean, one of the things I was telling Bill, you know, when I was at MetLife, and I'm sure they were just starting to do this, and I've heard that they are doing it, but also a lot of other companies are doing it, trying to focus on skills. And again, that's easier at the junior levels, right, than, you know, a vice president or an SVP. But they worry less about where you, like the industry you come from, more about your skill sets, which I think is really a wonderful way to open up your talent channels. And then obviously with people being able to work remote, even more so. But, you know, I have someone I was coaching at a junior level recently, she's been out of college a few years, moved into publishing out of school. That's all she wanted, English major. Loved it, did really well there, but, you know, did her homework and wasn't sure that she would have a promotion track or financially was going to be able to kind of make it in publishing the way that industry was evolving. And so she started a search looking in publishing, but a friend of hers had been at a financial services firm, got promoted internally, and referred her in for his job. And she knew nothing about the business. She knew nothing about financial services, but she went on the interviews, and it was really skill-based. And her communication skills, her command of English, the English language, I would think, you know, her maturity, you know, how she came across in the interview, and critical thinking, to your point, when I think of liberal arts, like really critical thinkers. Those were skills that got her the job, and then she just learned the business when she got there. It wasn't a job that she would ever have applied for, but, you know, a whole other conversation is referrals and how companies treat them. But I think I'm always feeling good about the skills-based hiring that I'm seeing going on.
Right.
And you have to know how to sell yourself for that,
Exactly.
too. Yeah.
And as you're peeling back the layers of the onion, you're starting to see things like, oh, we're not going to look at the SAT scores. We don't really care. We're hiring. We're not going to look at what your grade point average is. We want to know that you have skills. You know, and that's a change. That's a huge change.
Is that real, though, do you think? I mean,
We're starting to see it, right? Who knows if it's real or if it's the flavor of the day.
Interesting.
Or, you know, you talk to one person it is and one person it's not. But the reality is, come on, when you turn on the TV, you hear all the time, college is so expensive and you're not getting a return on investment. So what are young people supposed to believe? They don't have the experience that we may have, and the idea that this has all happened before. Just keep your nose to the grindstone and you'll figure it out. And that's an easy thing to say, right? Because we know that's what we did and it worked out.
Yeah, but my rent's coming up next month,
Right.
and I got to pay my rent.
Right.
I
And my parents are on my butt because
Get out
they're
of the
not
house.
going to pay it for me.
I know.
Yeah. So key message, right?
Yeah.
Skills are important.
Yes. And how you
Especially-
communicate those.
And how you
Yeah.
position
That's right.
yourself. Experiences help and
Help.
obviously are good, right?
Listen, now they're saying experiential learning is more important than anything else.
Huh.
So experiential learning are internships,
Yes.
project-based,
Yes.
you know, things.
Volunteer work.
Volunteer
Yeah.
work. And
Hugely.
that's stuff that people, you know, why should I volunteer? Like all of my friends have a internship and they're getting paid. A volunteer, they're going to frown upon that because I'm not getting paid. Well, first of all, nobody knows if you're getting paid or not, and they don't ask you that question.
Yeah.
And second of all, you can really develop major skills
Yes.
by volunteering.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, you know, your network, or however you want to, your connections are really important. You know,
Huge.
every job I
Critical.
ever found was through my network. And
Yes.
I don't claim to have a huge network, but I leveraged who I knew. I let people know what I wanted to do. So I think those connections are important. So even if you're volunteering, you're not getting paid, or you don't think it's what you want to do longer term, you are developing skills, and you're interacting with people there who probably know 3 people in
Right.
financial services. I always say to people, anyone you talk to, anyone you connect with knows someone. Even if they're not in the industry that you're in, they're likely going to know somebody. And as long as you make a good impression, and if you're volunteering, do the best job, whether you're volunteering or not volunteering, do the most excellent job you can, so that you're seen as an asset to an organization.
Yeah.
And work hard.
Right.
That's the other thing that hasn't changed over the years, I don't
Yeah.
think.
No, we've talked a lot about, we're all big advocates of networking is gold, right?
Yeah.
This guy, and I've said this many times, and he admits,
You're too kind.
no, you are a great networker. I'm okay at it. I'm pretty good. You're a very good
I am.
networker. I know that about
Yeah.
you, right? But does that come naturally, or do you intentionally say, with sincerity, I need to do this follow-up or networking or reach out because it's important to me?
Yeah, look, I think for me, the good example of how my network, and again, it's not huge, right? I mean, people think of it as being this huge group of people. For some people, maybe it is. For me, it was just very focused and very targeted. When I started looking for a job in London, I was here, and so I tried to leverage the connections I had here, particularly in executive search, and just tell my story. Hey, I would have loved to have worked for you here, but I'm going overseas. I'm going to London. I'd love to work for Search. And, it all ended up connecting through a gentleman who I had worked with in Search. He was big-minded. He was like, no problem. I'm going to connect you with, this firm. You're going to go interview, and then you're going to come back here and work for us. I mean, he was a visionary. And so I was lucky that he saw that possibility for me. And you don't always have that happen. But
But let me throw this out.
Yeah.
You were genuine.
yes.
And that was so important
Yes.
because they could trust that you could go through that process and come back.
Yes. True.
And when you started you started answering Bill's question, right away you could see you were very genuine.
Yeah, which is why I don't think it's, and this is, LinkedIn, it's, the network isn't, I have 100, follower. I don't know. It's just, who do you want to reach out to and ask for help? Because I think
Right.
people do want to help. You just have to be clear how you need their help. And so for me, it was really leveraging that. And so, friends, past colleagues, I mean, it wasn't really formulaic in my mind. I just went with my instincts, quite honestly. And, made forays, made connections, and it landed me a great job. The same when I went to Hong Kong in the very early part of my career. When I got married, my husband was based in Hong Kong, so moved over there. And again, used my connections,
Right.
So it's possible.
But it does need to be sincere and authentic,
Yeah.
because individuals that believe they're being leveraged only for benefit of one, and nothing is sincere about it, they'll reject you, obviously, right?
The other
sure.
thing I have to say, like the person that helped me get the connection in London, he knew me. We had worked together.
Yes.
And that helped because, as he represented me, I guess when I think about it now, he was kind of my agent, right? He could say to the folks in the UK, I know her, I trust her. She's really good at what she does. She's been in search. She's also been on the corporate talent acquisition side. You should talk to her. And so I think that goes a long way too, which is why leveraging former bosses, former peers, can really be very helpful because they have experience with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.